Have you ever wondered why a single 9-minute song manages to capture everything that was brilliant, ambitious, and emotionally devastating about Genesis in the 70s? Firth of Fifth isn't just another track from the 1973 album Selling England by the Pound. It's the moment where everything Genesis had been building since Trespass converged into an artistic statement, so complete, so perfectly executed, so emotionally resonant, that even 40 years later it continues making professional musicians stop and ask how the hell 5 Englishmen in their 20s managed to create something like this. The answer isn't just in technical skill, though it's there in abundance. It isn't just in compositional ambition, though the song's structure is sophisticated enough to yield academic theses. It's in the rare convergence of elements that individually would already be impressive, but together create something that transcends technical analysis and enters the territory of genuine art. Let's begin with the obvious that everyone mentions but few truly understand. Tony Banks's piano solo. Those opening chords that begin the song aren't just beautiful, they're a statement of intent. Banks is immediately telling you that you're not about to hear conventional rock, you're not entering safe territory. The harmonic progression he establishes in the first 20 seconds is complex enough to excite music theorists, but accessible enough that anyone with functioning ears feels its emotional impact. And here lies the first mark of true mastery: complexity that doesn't alienate, sophistication that invites rather than intimidates. The piano solo that comes after the initial vocal section is frequently cited as one of the best instrumental moments in progressive rock, and for good reasons. Banks isn't just demonstrating that he can play piano classically, though he certainly can. He's telling a story without words, creating a narrative arc that has tension, climax, and resolution. The left hand maintains that chord progression that's simultaneously melancholic and majestic, while the right draws melodies that always seem about to resolve but keep pulling you forward. It's like watching someone climb a mountain, each musical phrase elevating you a bit higher, until finally reaching the peak and leaving you suspended there for one glorious moment before beginning the controlled descent. What makes this solo truly exceptional is its emotional economy. Banks could have demonstrated much more technical virtuosity, could have played twice as many notes, could have shown off the way Keith Emerson frequently did. He chose not to. Each note exists because it needs to exist. Each phrase serves the larger emotional narrative. When you hear that solo, you're not thinking about how many hours Banks practiced or how technically difficult it is. You're simply feeling something deep and complex that you can't easily articulate in words. That's the difference between empty virtuosity and true artistic mastery. But Firth of Fifth isn't just the piano solo, and here we arrive at the crucial point that separates this composition from mere impressive technical exercises. The song functions as a complete journey, each section flowing organically into the next, each transition seeming inevitable. The piano opening establishes emotional territory. When the full band enters with that melancholic vocal melody, there's no rupture, there's continuation. Peter Gabriel sings about loneliness and isolation with a vulnerability that was rare in rock at the time. He's not performing in the theatrical sense for which he would become famous. He's just singing as a human being feeling something real and painful. The lyrics of Firth of Fifth deserve particular attention because they exemplify what Genesis did better than almost any other prog band. Write lyrics that were poetic without being pretentious, imagistic without being impenetrable. Gabriel sings about someone observing the world through a window, unable or unwilling to participate fully. The images are specific enough to create clear mental scenes, but open enough to allow personal interpretation. There's no complicated philosophical concept you need to understand, no obscure reference requiring a footnote. There's just universal human feeling of alienation and observation from distance, something anyone who's ever felt displaced can understand immediately. The transition from the vocal section to the instrumental section is a study in tension building. Mike Rutherford on bass begins to move more actively. Phil Collins on drums gradually adds rhythmic complexity. Steve Hackett on guitar begins to hint at the explosion that's coming. Banks on keyboards maintains those rich textures that are half organ, half synthesizer, creating a sonic bed that's simultaneously classical and futuristic. And then, when the tension has reached the point where it must release or implode, comes Hackett's guitar solo. This guitar solo is frequently cited as one of the best in progressive rock. And again, the reasons go beyond technique. Hackett had a guitar tone that was unique, that singing sound he achieved through his particular approach to tapping and his choice of effects. But what makes this solo truly special is its melodic construction. Like Banks's piano solo before it, this isn't about speed or pyrotechnics. It's about melody, about telling a musical story that has beginning, middle, and end. Hackett builds his phrases carefully, each one leading naturally to the next, creating momentum that culminates in that cathartic moment where you simultaneously want it to continue forever and know it must end. The interaction between musicians during this instrumental section demonstrates something that progressive rock critics often forget. The best moments of the genre weren't just about individual musicians showing off. They were about bands functioning as single organisms. Listen carefully during Hackett's solo, and you'll notice how Rutherford on bass isn't just maintaining harmony. He's dialoguing with the guitar, responding to melodic phrases with his own ideas. Collins on drums isn't just keeping time. He's punctuating specific moments, adding emphasis exactly where the music needs it. Banks on keys creates texture that fills spaces without competing for attention. This is a band that played together enough, that understands each other musically enough, to function as a single unit instead of 5 competing egos. The formal structure of the composition deserves analysis because it exemplifies sophistication that doesn't draw unnecessary attention to itself. Firth of Fifth has a form that theoretically could be described in precise musicological terms, with its distinct sections and careful transitions. But when you hear the song, you're not thinking about formal structure. You're just experiencing an emotional journey that happens to have been organized in a particularly effective way. That's the mark of true compositional mastery, when structure serves emotional content so perfectly that it becomes invisible. Compare Firth of Fifth with other prog epics from the same period, and you'll begin to understand what makes it special. Yes is Close to the Edge is technically more ambitious, structurally more complex, more challenging for musicians to execute. But honest question, does it move you emotionally in the same way? Genesis's own Supper's Ready is longer, more elaborate, more varied in its sections. But does it have the same emotional cohesion, the same sense of complete journey? These aren't questions with right or wrong answers. They're matters of personal preference. But asking them reveals what makes Firth of Fifth particular. Its combination of technical ambition and emotional accessibility is nearly perfect. The production of the album Selling England by the Pound, the work of John Burns and the band itself, serves Firth of Fifth perfectly. Each instrument has its space in the sonic spectrum. Nothing is buried or excessively prominent. Banks's piano sounds rich and present without dominating. Hackett's guitar has that clean singing tone that became his trademark. Rutherford's bass is audible and articulate without being heavy. Collins's drums are precise and present without being aggressive. Banks's additional keyboards create atmosphere without creating confusion. This production clarity wasn't guaranteed in 1973. When many prog albums suffered from muddy mixes where instruments fought for space. That Firth of Fifth sounds so clean and balanced 40 years later is testament not just to the technical skill of the engineers, but also to the artistic good taste involved in the entire production. Gabriel's vocal performance deserves more attention than it generally receives when discussing this song. His delivery is restrained, almost fragile at moments, but perfectly calibrated to serve the melancholic atmosphere of the composition. Gabriel in the early 70s was developing his voice and his approach to singing. He wasn't yet the fully formed vocalist he would become on later albums. But this vulnerability, this slightly tentative quality in his voice works perfectly for the material. When he sings about observing the world through a window, you completely believe you're hearing someone genuinely isolated and insecure. The specific lyric about the Firth of Fifth, the estuary of the River Forth in Scotland, is interesting because it exemplifies how Genesis used specific geography poetically without making it the central point. The song could work equally well if it were about any desolate coast, any place where water meets land, and creates that sense of threshold between worlds. The geographical specificity adds texture and concreteness, but doesn't limit the composition's emotional reach. This is a lesson many composers never learn. Specific details can amplify universal resonance instead of limiting it, if used correctly. The historical context of selling England by the pound adds an additional layer of meaning to Firth of Firth. This album was released in 1973, a crucial moment both for Genesis and for progressive rock as a genre. The band had achieved a certain level of success, but wasn't yet a household name. They were pressured to produce something commercially viable, while maintaining artistic integrity. Selling England by the pound achieved that nearly impossible balance. It was a commercial and artistic success simultaneously. Firth of Firth is a crucial part of that equation, because it demonstrated unquestionable artistic ambition, while remaining musically accessible enough not to alienate casual listeners. The influence of Firth of Firth on subsequent music is difficult to trace precisely, but impossible to deny. How many prog pianists tried to replicate that opening solo? How many guitarists studied every note of Hackett's solo? How many bands tried to create their own melancholic epics structured in similar ways? The song became a blueprint, a template demonstrating how artistic ambition and emotional accessibility could coexist. That so many imitations failed only demonstrates how difficult what Genesis achieved here was. You can copy structure, you can even copy specific chord choices, but you can't replicate that particular chemistry between musicians. That moment in time where everything converged perfectly. Analyzing the composition from a purely technical point of view, there are countless noteworthy elements. The harmonic progression is rich in tension and resolution, using seventh chords and extensions that add complexity without creating dissonance. The meter changes are subtle enough not to draw attention, but effective in creating a sense of organic flow. The orchestration, the way different instruments enter and exit, creating varied textures throughout the piece, shows sophistication that would rival classical orchestral arrangements. But again, the true triumph is that all this technical sophistication serves an emotional purpose, never exists just to impress. The song's dynamics, the way it moves between delicate moments and more intense explosions, creates an emotional journey that mirrors real human experiences. Life isn't constant in its intensity. We alternate between moments of quiet contemplation and intense emotion. Firth of Firth captures this natural rhythm of emotional experience in a way that feels intuitive, but requires tremendous compositional skill to execute effectively. The transitions are never abrupt or arbitrary. There's always preparation. There's always internal logic even when you can't articulate exactly what that logic is. The legacy of Firth of Firth within Genesis's own history is significant. When the band went through the massive transformation of losing Gabriel and then Hackett, when Collins took over lead vocals and the sound changed dramatically towards something more commercial, Firth of Firth remained in the live repertoire for years. Collins singing it never had the same fragile quality as Gabriel's version, but it worked because the song is strong enough to survive different interpretations. Even when the band became a pop phenomenon in the 80s, even when many old fans felt they had betrayed their prog roots, Firth of Firth remained as a reminder of what they once were, what they were still capable of when they wanted to be. For modern listeners encountering this song for the first time, detached from all historical context, Firth of Firth still works because it's fundamentally good composition, serving clear emotional purpose. You don't need to know anything about 70s progressive rock to respond to that opening piano solo. You don't need to understand Genesis's history to be moved by Hackett's guitar solo. The music speaks for itself, across decades, through dramatic changes in musical taste and technology. That's the mark of genuine art in any medium. Survival through change. Continued relevance even when original context has disappeared. The comparison between Firth of Firth and other compositions on the same album is instructive. Selling England by the Pound is consistently excellent. Each track has its own merit. I Know What I Like is more accessible, more straightforward. It was the single. The Cinema Show is technically more complex, structurally more adventurous. Dancing with the Moonlit Night is more elaborate in its multiple sections, but Firth of Fifth remains as the album's emotional heart, the moment where everything converges most perfectly. It's the song that sets the standard against which all others are measured. The live performance of Firth of Fifth, captured in various recordings through the years, demonstrates how the composition was robust enough to allow interpretation while maintaining its essence. Some nights Hackett's solo was more restrained. Other times it was more expansive. Banks's piano solo was rarely played exactly the same twice, but the fundamental structure, the emotional arc, remained constant. This flexibility within a defined framework is characteristic of truly great composition, strong enough to maintain identity but open enough to allow musicians to bring something personal to each performance. Looking at Firth of Fifth through a modern critical lens, it's tempting to focus on elements that date the recording. The synthesizer timbres are unmistakably 70s. The production has certain characteristics that temporally situate the recording. But these qualities, instead of diminishing the music, add character. They're like patina on quality antique furniture, evidence of age that adds instead of subtracts value. The music isn't trying to sound timeless in the sense of being without era. It's comfortably situated in its historical moment, while expressing emotions that transcend that moment. The question of why Firth of Fifth can be considered a masterpiece then has multiple answers that converge. Technically, it's impeccable, each musician operating at the peak of their capabilities. Compositionally, it's sophisticated, demonstrating ambition and skill rarely combined so effectively. Emotionally, it's devastating, touching something deep and universal about loneliness and observation from distance. Structurally, it's elegant, each section serving the greater whole, and crucially, it accomplishes all this while remaining accessible, never alienating listeners with pretension or gratuitous complexity. When we place Firth of Fifth in the broader context of progressive rock as a genre, it represents the ideal the movement was pursuing: music that expands the structural and harmonic possibilities of rock, while maintaining direct emotional connection with listeners. So much prog rock failed because it prioritized technical demonstration over emotional communication, or because it became so conceptually elaborate that the music itself became secondary. Firth of Fifth avoids these traps completely. It's ambitious without being pretentious, complex without being impenetrable, technical without being cold. The final truth about Firth of Fifth is that technical analysis, however detailed and insightful, never completely captures why the song works so well. You can dissect harmonic progressions. You can map formal structure. You can catalog every instrumental and dynamic choice. But in the end, the music works because 5 extremely talented musicians at the peak of their creative capabilities made consistently excellent artistic choices in service of a clear emotional vision. They captured something true about human experience and expressed it through music in a way that continues to resonate decades later. This isn't just a masterpiece of early Genesis. It's a masterpiece period, demonstrating what progressive rock could be when everything worked perfectly.